We're here today with Eric Wokus, safety consultant to the Action Staffing Group, and someone who has been preoccupied and focused on avoiding accidents at the workplace for many, many years. Eric works closely with myself and my entire staff, educating us, reviewing our procedures, and making sure that everything we are doing promotes a safety-minded culture, not only in our office, but out in the field where we serve our client companies. And I want to break the conversation down to two different important pieces. Number one, we're going to talk about safety inside of a facility, such as a warehouse. And then secondly, we're going to talk about taking safety on the road, because there are differences in the things that you have to look out for. So Eric, I want to say welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and joining me. Before we started this presentation, we talked about one simple fact that is so important in promoting safety. And that's making sure that you, the individual that's been assigned to a job for the day, or for the month for that matter, knows exactly what you're supposed to be doing, the job you're supposed to do, instructions on what to do, training on what to do, and sticking to what you are supposed to be there doing. It happens too often that one of my employees will talk to me at the end of the day and say something like this: "Well, Mark, I know you sent me into the facility to do janitorial work. Mop up, clean up some spills, put some garbage out, and later on the first day, an operator comes over to me and says, well, one of our forklift drivers didn't show up today. Can you just move that vehicle from here to there or help us fill this order?" Now, if you're sitting there saying, well, if the boss tells me to do something, I'm going to go ahead and do it. In this particular case, you would be flat out wrong. If a supervisor comes over to you and asks you to do anything that you're not prepared to do or haven't been told to do by the Action Staffing Group in your job description, you should politely say to that individual, "I am not allowed to do this type of work. However, please call my agency and discuss it with them. I don't want to create a problem, but I have instructions from my employer, which is the Action Staffing Group." Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
Mark, you're absolutely right. One of the major causes of accidents is people doing jobs that are outside from what they were trained to do, and they're not provided the proper equipment. So don't take a chance. Action understands this, and the client needs to understand this as well. You're there to do a specific job, and just that job only. This happens way too often that a client will ask you to do a favor and ends up a tragedy. So make sure that if your client supervisor there is not an action supervisor, asks you to do something that's beyond your job description, take that up with your supervisor, take it up with the home office at Action, and make sure that you have the authority to do that work.
Great. I can remember a situation which horrified me, and it happened last year, where we had a warehouse selector who was properly trained and credentialed to operate a forklift and select merchandise. This person was asked in the middle of the morning by a truck driver, "Can you do me a favor and back this truck up 2 feet?" I mean, I don't care if someone asks you just to start up a truck to warm it up. If you are not a certified truck driver, credentialed with Department of Transportation to operate a truck, you don't operate a truck for any reason, for anything. And if you think that doing so is going to make you a hero and get you further along in your career, I'm going to tell you that type of situation would do the exact opposite. Never, ever do anything outside of the job description of the work that you're supposed to be doing. That is a requirement for Action Staffing Group, and it should be a requirement for you. Now, another thing I want to talk about is elevation in terms of where you're working on the job. Action Staffing Group does not employ any temporary workers that are to go on roofs or work in any situations involving height. So for instance, if you're brought into a facility to be a porter and do cleaning, and all of a sudden someone comes over to you and says, listen, we want you to come over to these shelves, which go about 50 feet in the air, and just go up and start cleaning the shelves from above. If you think you're going to start climbing up the shelf to get to the top one, you're in for a rude awakening. That is a very dangerous situation. And only in situations that were pre-discussed and pre-approved with Action, where it involved a safe mechanism to go up from the floor, such as a reinforced movable staircase. You've seen these in warehouses, you've seen these in retail stores, which has a locking mechanism to keep you safe with handlebars around you that you can hold on to. A situation like that might be permissible if it was checked out and approved by our safety department in advance. Let me remind you, feet on the floor, always working on the floor, unless other arrangements have been made and approved. And again, the best thing to do whenever you have a question, check with the office. Call us, ask the questions. Don't take safety into your own hands. Eric, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, again, Mark's absolutely right. And let me remind you too, not just you, there may be other employees at Action Staffing that decide that, well, maybe I can take this step, walk up the steps, or maybe I can go up these pallets and clean up above. Remind them too that that's not part of their job. If you see someone not acting in a safe manner or is doing something outside of their job scope, bring that to the attention of Action Staffing as well.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk for a moment about another one of my unfortunate favorite subjects, and that is slips and falls. I've seen so many situations in warehouses where you're in the middle of the workday, and sometimes the workday is the middle of the night, particularly if you're selecting product to be shipped the next morning. And lo and behold, a container of oil, a container of mayonnaise, ketchup, tomato sauce, you name it. Something gets opened up, spilled. It could be ice cream, it could be milk. And in the heat of battle, nobody's rushing to get a mop and clean this up, which, by the way, should be reported and taken care of as quickly as possible. But you see this time and time again. And Eric, I'd like to ask you if you have any suggestions on what people can do to avoid slipping and hurting themselves.
I certainly do, Mark. One thing in the scenario that Mark just said, if something breaks and there's a spill on the floor and you can't get it cleaned up right away, they should at least have a wet floor sign or something to put a barricade around that. That's something that you should know in advance when you're at that facility. Where can I find these wet floor signs? Who do I get in touch with if this situation occurs?
Okay, thank you. Now, let's step out of the warehouse and out on the road. There are many times where we have workers that are working as driver helpers, or in some cases, they're commercial drivers. But let's separate the two different positions. A driver helper is someone that will leave from a client location and go out with a route driver making deliveries. So in the course of the day, you might have 10, 15 stops where the truck opens up, merchandise comes off the truck, it's put on a hand truck, and it's brought into a building. Now, it sounds like a pretty simple procedure, but believe it or not, it gets complicated. And there's a whole list of do's and don'ts that I want to cover. And Eric, I invite you to chime in anywhere you see fit. For instance, let's start with the trip as it starts out. The very first thing you need to do when you get in that truck is buckle up. Put on your seatbelt. You know, in this day and age, a lot of our clients have surveillance inside the trucks. And it's becoming more and more of an issue because they want to be in compliance with Department of Transportation. And they want to know what their drivers are doing. So many times I'll get sent a picture on my computer, which shows me one of my employees sitting in the front of the truck without their seatbelt on. And I cannot tell you how this gets me very, very upset. Because if that truck stops short or makes a quick turn, guess what? You and that windshield are going to make contact. And that's the last thing I want to see happen to you. So please, when you get in that truck, buckle up. Even if the truck is sitting in a parking lot, you never know if it can get hit by something. So always, when you're in the truck, buckle up. When you climb onto the truck and off the truck, that also takes care. Look up and down, making sure that you're making contact with the truck properly to get good footing, to make sure you've established contact so you can spring yourself up or down. Hold on tightly as you're entering the cab of the truck. Make sure your door is closed and locked when you're in the truck. These are all things we take for granted, but they're the simplest things to do to avoid injuring yourself. Now,
let me just
go ahead.
Get refrain here. 3-point contact. When getting on a truck or off the truck, it's very simple to do it safely. Thinking of the 3-point contact rule. 3-point contact means either 2 hands and your foot or 2 feet in your hand. Always make sure you have something, 3 items on a solid surface. This is, and there's no jumping on the truck or jumping off the truck. That's strictly forbidden.
Yeah, and especially, I've seen people jump off a truck while the truck is moving, okay? You want to make sure that you're very, very mindful of what Eric just said to prevent yourself from twisting an ankle or getting yourself into a situation where you're going to slip and fall. And we talked earlier about the importance of being dressed properly. If you're going to be out in the field making deliveries, you want to make sure you have proper pants, shirt, jacket if necessary, gloves if necessary, safety vest. You want to make sure all these things are on your person. And I always suggest you bring extra layers with you, particularly in the colder months of the year, when all of a sudden you might catch a chill and want to warm up, layer up. You're not going to have the opportunity to take a break and go shopping at your local store in the middle of the workday. That driver wants to get his route done and get all of his customers their goods. So again, you're there to keep up with the pace, not slow it down. Now, when we get to the first stop and we're about to make the first delivery, I want you to keep in mind the only piece of equipment that you are authorized to operate is a hand truck. Again, if the driver says to you, I want you to back the truck up, or there's a piece of equipment at the client company that he wants you to operate with a motor on it, your answer is a polite and professional, I'm not allowed to do this. If you have a question or a concern, you need to contact my employer, Action Staffing Group. You're perfectly entitled to say that, but you say it nicely. Now, let's talk about some etiquette. There should be no smoking of any kind at the client company, in their facility, on their grounds. If you need to use a bathroom, please ask to use a bathroom. Do not take matters into your own hands in other ways, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Every client you go to has video surveillance every place. Do you know about 5 years ago? I lost a customer because one of my workers decided to relieve themselves by their loading dock. And this is a place where food gets shipped and received. Now, you sit there shaking your head saying, how could that happen? It happens because there's a lapse in judgment in people's minds. It happens. You need to use a bathroom? Ask to use the bathroom. Or let the driver know in between stops. Maybe you'll make a stop at a gas station or someplace where you can take care of things. You need to be responsible when you're out working every day. Now, when you get to that client company, the driver's going to stop the truck. That's when you exit. Look and see where you're exiting. If he's parked along a busy road, you need to look in front of you, to the side, and back of you, to make sure when you open that door, you don't hit an ongoing truck or car coming by. You got to look at where you are.
And let me just add, in the city, bicycles.
Right.
There's quite a few of those accidents.
Right. So again, be aware of your environment. And again, don't stray far from the truck. And as Eric just pointed out, you might be making a mid-city delivery, and there's no room to operate there. So again, you want to be mindful of that. Is the truck parked uphill, downhill? Is there anything around you that you might slip and fall on? If it's wintertime, are you parked near any ice, any snow? Again, be aware, look all around your person. Now you come to the back of the truck, the driver opens up the door. Now let me repeat that. The driver opens up the door. You're not supposed to be opening up the door. That's the driver's job. He is the person or she who handles all of the equipment. Do you know how many people I've seen open a door up improperly, get their hands wedged between the two back doors? You don't have the extensive training the driver has. Let the driver open up the back of the truck. Now, in most cases, there are no lift gates on the back of these vehicles. That's why there's a driver helper, you assigned to the delivery. So what you'll see many times is the driver will take a metal slide and attach it to the back of the truck, and thereby hand truck and product and you and driver can go down this slide and make your delivery. You want to take a look at it. Again, did it get wet on a rainy day? Is it now slippery? Again, this is the reason why you're wearing boots, for better grip, better protection. As you load up that hand truck, there's proper etiquette, particularly with food, on how you're supposed to be loading up that hand truck. Okay, if you have raw chicken on the truck and boxes of grapes, you never put raw chicken or raw fish on top of produce, on top of lettuce, on top of grapes, because guess what? That's the quickest way to have food contamination. So again, be mindful of how you're loading that hand truck. Also, don't put light items on the bottom, heavy items on top.
Exactly.
Number one, you're going to damage the product. That's unacceptable. But equally importantly, that hand truck is bound to tip over and hurt somebody. So you want to put your heaviest items on the bottom and your lightest items above. Also, how many times, Eric, have you seen someone walking with a hand truck and they pile it up so high they have to look around the sides to see where they're going? Okay?
And that's another area where a lot of accidents occur. There's no need to do everything in one load. It's always safer to break it down into smaller loads. One, as Mark pointed out, better visibility with a hand truck. And two, it's lighter to carry. If you have two smaller loads, there's less chance of getting injured than having one heavy load. So keep that in mind. It's always to take more loads, smaller amounts, than have one big, large load, which you could get injured on.
And think about this. Is the delivery going to be made faster if I slip and fall, if I drop the product, or if I bang into somebody or run over somebody's ankle? Is that going to make for a quicker, more efficient delivery than if I took the steps that Eric just talked about and worked carefully at a pace that gets the job done, but gets it done efficiently and safely? That's the key. You want to deliver the merchandise safely and successfully at all times. Now, as you move with your hand truck, a lot of times where you drop off the product, you're going downstairs. You're not always going to have the luxury of just rolling into an elevator. So I want you to be mindful that when you are dealing with stairs, not a ramp, that is a hazardous situation. But unfortunately, you cannot avoid going into these stairwells and staircases. So let's talk about the proper procedure. Number one, always scope out where you're going. So if you come off the truck and you're pushing the hand truck, and now you can see, because we talked about the importance of visual, now you get to the staircase. What I suggest you do is park the hand truck with the merchandise right there and walk down those steps. Make sure that there's no grease, there's no debris, there's nothing in your path that's going to create a hazard. It only takes a minute to avoid so much aggravation and so much injury. So take a moment, scope it out. Now you see it's dry, it's safe. Now you take that hand truck holding on to both handles very carefully, and one step at a time, you go down those steps. You tilt the hand truck back so that the weight is evenly distributed and you have control of that hand truck. In the unfortunate and unlikely event that you have a slipping episode with that hand truck, do not be a hero. If need be, let go of the hand truck. I'd rather have cases of broken eggs than cases of broken bones. Let go of the hand truck. Now, once successfully down the steps or down the ramp and into the facility, be mindful of your continued safety and the safety of others. If you're delivering to a school, for instance, I had a case a few years ago where a helper was coming through a hallway, and sadly, an office administrator just appeared in that hallway, almost like two cars converging in an intersection. He didn't see her, she didn't see him. What was the result? He went over her ankle, broken ankle. Okay? Lawsuit, bad situation. So just like you would be operating a motor vehicle, the reason why visibility is so important, you want to be looking ahead, you want to be looking to the side, you want to see if anybody has entered into your path so that you can stop and avoid hurting them or yourself getting hurt. Now, once in the facility, most cases you'll be delivering into a kitchen. More hazard problems. There could be grease on the floor. There could be cold environment, warm environment, wet environment. People running around trying to deliver product, finish up making breakfast. You got to be aware of everything. And guess what? If the chef says to you, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. Go take that hand truck into my walk-in freezer." And you walk in the freezer, there's another place that you can slip. There's another place where all of a sudden you're in a cold environment. So once you know the landscape, you always want to make sure that you're dressed appropriately, gloves if necessary, and just make sure you're prepared to go into any of these situations successfully and safely. And you always follow the direction of the client customer, where they tell you to deliver the merchandise. Maybe they want you to stack it a certain way. And let me take a moment and talk about the importance of cleanliness. Along with safety, it's so important, particularly in a food environment, that you arrive with a clean presentation. You're going into places where people are serving and preparing food. The last thing you want to do is show up with a dirty shirt with stains on it, food debris, what have you. It's very, very important to respect where you're delivering this merchandise and who you're delivering it for. Our client companies and for us. Professional presentation, professional hygiene, well-grooming, dressed for success. These are all important elements, whether you're in an office setting or an industrial setting. It makes no difference to Action Staffing Group. We want you to be professional at all times.
And just to remind you, we mentioned this before, working with a hand truck, going up and down stairs, the kitchen, one thing you have to remember, always walk with your eyes first. I'm sure there's many kitchens you've been to, the number one hazard is wet floors. They're always wet in the kitchen. So you always got to make sure that you check to make where those wet spots are, make sure that surface isn't too slippery, and make sure you handle your delivery with extra care going through those kitchens.
You know, one of the most important aspects of the work that we do every day, Eric, involves some type of lifting. So it's an important area that I want to talk about for a few minutes, and I want to begin with this reminder to everybody watching this video. When we sit down and talk to you about a particular job assignment, obviously we'll describe what you will be doing, what's expected of you. The subject of lifting may come up. And what you should be looking for in that situation is a description by your action associate asking you, are you prepared to lift a certain amount of pounds? Now, it might be something 5 to 10 pounds, 10 to 25 pounds, or in some unusual cases, beyond 50 pounds. The first thing you want to do is always give an honest answer to the question, are you in a position to be able to lift this amount of weight? And if you are, please say so. But If you have a chronic problem with a shoulder or lower back pain or whatever, have a history of situation involving problems with lifting, now is the time to be honest with us and yourself and say, no, I really would prefer not to go into a work facility and do a job involving lifting. There are other things I'm happy to do, but I can't lift. That's the time to avoid having a safety problem and be honest about it. Because not only could you hurt yourself, you might be in a situation where you're working in tandem with another person and the two of you are lifting a box, and if you give way and let go of that box, all of a sudden the box is now on your feet and the other person's feet. Not a good situation. So again, cover the subject of lifting with care and be aware of whether you can do it or not. Now, going beyond that, if in fact you have accepted responsibility to do some lifting, I want to talk about the important safety guidelines of proper technique. And Eric, maybe you could shed some light on the subject.
Absolutely. Back injuries are some of the serious injuries we've come across in workers' compensation. And it's something you completely want to avoid. Because sometimes some people, when they injure their back, it could be something that changes their life forever. So you have to do everything you can to prevent injuring your back. And it's something that can be prevented easily. The first thing you need to do is use your head. Think before you lift. You look at a box, test the weight. Make sure that the box is not too heavy for you. We mentioned before food. A box could contain lettuce in it. The same box size could have frozen fish or poultry in it. Obviously, the frozen fish are going to be much heavier than a box of lettuce. So always check the weight of that box first. The other thing, when you do the lift, use a wide stance. We've always heard bend with your knees, not with your back. Well, yes, bend with your knees is the most important thing to do, and not to bend over with your back. But to make the lift even easier and safer is to use a wide stance. That way, when you bend with your knees, it brings your body down closer to the ground where you can pick up the box. Once you've completed the lift, make sure that the path that you're walking is clear. Make sure that there's no wet spots, any ice. We talked about going in the freezer. Make sure the floor is not slippery. We've talked about going to the kitchens. There's always water on the floor in the kitchen, so make sure that you notice where it is and you take extra precaution going through it. The other thing, when you change directions, make sure you don't twist with your back, but you actually pick up your feet and move your feet over. That way, you prevent injuring your back. So there's three important things. Check the weight first, do a wide stance, and twist with your legs, not with your back.
Thank you, Eric.